This is Chris from Therion. You're listening to Tinnitus.
Last year, the Order of the Dragon box set came out via Floga Records. Were you involved with that? It's 5 tapes with the first albums. Are there plans to release the 5 albums again in luxury editions like Nuclear Blast did with Tili or Telai a couple of years ago?
No, I just get a copy of something when it's already done.
Does it bother you,
I
or
empty my mailbox and then like, oh, what's this? We have a cassette release. It's usually like that. They don't ask you every time somebody do some small thing. They license the stuff all the time, and well, it's their right to do so, and I don't have anything against it. And I was surprised though that when we took some of these boxes into the mail order, they were sold out in no time at all. And
500 copies, something like that.
when I think about cassettes, I think about something I was very happy to get rid of. It was like a poor man's version of listening to music. Poor sound quality. It took forever to wind between the songs, and it was fragile. It could break. It could get stuck. Nobody really liked cassettes except a few people who listened via these ghetto blasters or stuff like that. But they were a clear minority. So to have a revival or nostalgia around that, to me, is like having a revival around fax machines or personal, the beepers that we had for a while, something like that. It's like, why would you want a fax machine when you can send email? Why would you want a beeper when you can have a mobile phone? That's how I think about vinyl. But I think probably more than 50% of the people who bought it, they don't even have a cassette player. It's just they've seen it in movies, how it used to be, and they think it's a cool thing to own. It's, metal people are having collection fetish. They want to.
I'm guilty as well. Yeah.
Well, I mean, speaking of myself, when I bought every release from Celtic Frost back in the days, I bought a second copy of Into the Pandemonium just because it was an American press with a red logo instead of a white logo. So that's how metalheads are, I guess.
Yeah. How do you look back at albums like Lepaka, Clifford or Beyond Sanctorum? Does it bother you that some of the older fans only want you to play stuff like that when you perform live? Do you still like to play some of these songs every now and then, or?
We stopped playing it long time ago. It's based on my vocals, and I don't like singing death metal vocals. I wouldn't mind playing a few of the songs if somebody else did the vocals, but there are actually very, very few people who would prefer to hear that. If you read it on internet, you may see a few people that comment, but you have to keep in mind, like if you read 20 comments on the internet, and it will be like, oh, everybody's saying this. No, it's not everybody. It's 20 people. We sold over 1 million albums, so if 20 people say this or that, doesn't matter. And when we re-released the first albums in a box 15 years ago, they didn't sell particularly well. No, I mean, they sold a bit, but most of our fans today have very little interest in death metal. So I guess a few people bought it because they're open-minded, and some other bought it because they want to have a complete collection. But I mean, when we released the first album, we sold 5,000 copies. 5,000. That's not a big crowd.
No.
And Beyond Sanctorum sold maybe 7,000 or 8,000 when it was out.
But for an underground Swedish death metal band, that wasn't bad at all. If you compare that other bands from that era.
I think Left Hand Path from Entombed sold 20,000 in comparison. So of course that's not
at the Gates or whatever.
Well, At the Gates came later. They were like 90. Let's see, we played with them 92. Then they were just brand new. Death metal became bigger around 93, 94, 95. Lepaka Clifford sold 12,000, I think. But we were considered an odd band that didn't really fit in. And at that time, Dismember sold think 50,000 copies, around that level, and that was the maximum what you could sell of a death metal album. I think Morbid Angel maybe did a little bit better, Carcass did a bit better, but besides them, I think 50,000, that was pretty much what you could sell. Like Benediction and those bands that did well, they sold around that, and Napalm Death, Voltro, those bands. Obituary, they did a little bit better too, because they were so big in the US actually. I guess the US bands could sell more because they were better at pushing albums in their home ground, but they did pretty much the same in Europe. So we were actually even when we did Lepaka Cliffoth, we were not far from an underground band, even if we were on Nuclear Blast. But today people seem to forget that we were considered a very odd band back then. Today people are so used that you have crossovers, you mix everything, and like, hey, what's the big deal? Therion was a death metal band, but back then, we were a death metal band thanks to the death metal vocals, but we were looked upon as some really odd outcast, and we couldn't get tours because who would we tour with? We didn't fit in with anybody.
Is it stuff that you still listen to every now and then, or?
I don't listen to my own records.
And other death metal bands from that era?
Seldom, but if somebody put on the first two Autopsy albums, I would be like, or some old Bathory or Celtic Frost. But the only more brutal music I put on myself, that would be Voivod, because I'm an insanely big Voivod fan. So Killing Technology or something like that. The only problem is I like the band so much and the music, so I can't put it on in the background and do something. It will just steal my attention, and I have to sit and listen to it full attention.
You made Les Épaves EP and Les Fleurs du Mal on your own label, featuring covers from France Gall, Gainsbourg, Sylvie Vartan. Do you also have a special love for 60s and 70s French music? No love for Jacques Brel, my fellow countryman?
Well, I like a lot of really odd music in the eyes of the metal fans. I like schlagers from the 30s, 40s, 50s. But there's something about the female French sound that really caught me. Like not the most commercial artists. They were maybe too much chewing gum music, but there's something about France. I mean, if you imagine France as a machine and you put in something normal in one end of the machine, something completely distorted and weird will come out on the other side. And to French people, that's just normal. For the rest of the world, it's like, what the fuck is that? Anybody who have seen a French movie in their life would know what I'm talking about. But I always loved French movies and the weird French thing. So when
you mean stuff from Godard or Melville or
City of the Lost Children is one of my favorite movies, and Delicatesse is another movie, and there's a movie called Les Mécaniques du Femme, which had Therion in it. It's an independent movie, and they're at a very dodgy club where they snort cocaine and fuck in a toilet. And what music are they dancing to there? Enter Vril Ja by Therion. I mean, I'm honored to be in the movie, but who in the right mind would get the idea that you dance to, out of all the songs, Enter Vril Ja by Therion in a disco? It's just so bizarre, and I just love it.
But how do you translate the newer songs to a live venue, to a concert like this? Because you don't have all the singers with you. How does it work out?
Like we always do. There's always been different singers on the records and different singers live.
But now it's even more grandiose, bigger scale, I guess.
No, we just treat it as pure musical compositions in this regard. The theatrical performance will be end of the year or something, and then of course it will be all 15 singers and all that. However, the more I think about it, I'm not sure it will be Therion performing that. Maybe we'll do one or two special shows, but I would like to franchise it. If you see Jesus Christ Superstar, you're not gonna be like, oh, where's Ian Gillan? Just because he sang on the audio recording in, I think it was Was it 1970?
Must be something like that, yeah.
So I think this type of audience, which will mostly not be Therion fans, it will be musical audience, I guess, the mainstream audience. They don't know Therion and they don't give a shit to Therion or anyway. It's just an evening of entertainment equal to going to the cinema and watch a movie. You don't need to know who the director is. Most people don't care. They just want to be entertained. So I don't really see a reason why it has to be Therion, because it limits it to making performance in one place. I would rather see it franchised, and they can put it up in New York, London, Brussels, Paris, Vienna, Berlin, everywhere at the same time. But we'll see. I mean, it's a difficult thing to stage, and we would need to find a production company that have a lot of cash and that have a lot of experience and that really would like to do this, because they would have to invest quite a lot in it.
For a lot of people, streaming has changed the way they listen to music, consume music. Playlists have become more important. Songs have been, for a lot of people, become more important than entire albums. Do you think it would have been easier to put out an album like this one 20 years ago to convince record labels to invest in it, or is it an advantage that you have streaming for an album like this?
There are advantages and disadvantages. It would have been easier in a way. We didn't have any problem to convince the record label, though. They are very supportive and they're kind of used these days about my crazy ideas. So that's not an issue. But, well, on a personal note, I really don't like the whole idea of streaming. It's low quality and people listen through their fucking rubbish computer music equipment, and they're impatient and probably barely finish a song before skipping to the next one. And it's not a good way to discover new music in a quality way. On the other hand, it's great that you can pre-listen everything from your home. I mean, I'm not totally against it. Even me have used Spotify to, check some band. But if I like something, I'll buy it. But it's a good way of pre-listening. But when I do so, I will do it with my iPhone and connect it to some really good headphones, so I get a somewhat decent music experience. I remember one time when Rob Halford released his first solo album, and I was so curious, like, wow, he's getting back to metal again. And that's the only time I actually illegally downloaded a record, because I was so impatient. It was. I think I had already ordered it via mail order, so I actually paid for it, but I didn't get it yet, and I really wanted to listen to it. So I found the MP3s and I downloaded them and listened via the computer. And then I thought, well, it's not that good, and well, anyway, it's good that I bought it so the old man can afford a cup of coffee, something like that. And then when the CD came and I listened to the stereo, I was like, wow, was I brain dead when I listened to this? The computer, this is fantastic. It's like one of the best Priest albums, except it doesn't say Judas Priest on it. So then I realized myself how big difference it does. If you sit and listen through your shit computer speakers, you will not really get it. You lose so many details, the core of the music. And I think a lot of people who write negative comments about new albums in general, they have to eat what they write, eat the words later. I mean, if I would have been 16 years old and a typical internet guy writing very emotional comments like, oh, he betrayed me, he made a record that I didn't like, whatever, then it would have been very embarrassing later, when I realized, fuck, this is like top 5 Priest albums almost.
On the other hand, I guess that when you're a musician involved with metal and hard rock and also gothic, that you have like a true loyal fan base that still is used to buying music, actual CDs and vinyl and stuff like that.
Yeah, the metal audience are the best consumer group on the planet. Anybody who sell anything would envy the metal audience because they're very loyal. On the other hand, they're very emotional about it. So, I mean, if you don't like anything else from any other product category, you'll be like, okay, I didn't like the new one, so I'm not gonna buy it. No big deal. But if a band you really like make a record not in your liking, you feel like betrayed and have to write exaggeratedly emotional comments on internet and make a big deal out of it. Which is, of course, yeah, it's a two-edged sword, you know, for musicians. And in one way, you can really capitalize on it. A lot of bands can continue to release lukewarm albums, and it will always be some people buying it. And on the other hand, if you do a really good album, but it's not in the direction the fans want, a lot of people will slag you off and say it's absolute shit, even though it's quality, just not their cup of tea.
I have a last question. You started, or the name changed to Therion in 1988, so it marks the 30th anniversary. Do you have something special planned?
No, I mean, releasing the rock opera is more than enough to celebrate the 30th year anniversary, and I consider the band that we started in 87 because it was just a name. We were the same members, and we just stopped playing for a few months and got together again, and I swapped from playing the bass to play guitar instead, and besides that it was the same band.
Thank you very much for your time.